TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's TellyCast. Joining me on this week's show are Nathalie Wogue, one of the international TV industry's leading entertainment format experts, and Broadcast Magazine's insight editor, Jesse Whittock. K7 Media's Girts Licis is back in the saddle, and Deadline's TV editor, Peter White, brings us up to speed on the latest news from Hollywood. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. I'm delighted to welcome, direct from LA, content creator, developer, buyer, strategist, and an executive known as one of the leading international entertainment format experts, Nathalie Wogue. A former journalist at TF1, independent TV producer, head of development at Fremantle France, global VP of formats at IMG, and chief international officer at Endemol France, Nathalie helped launch iconic formats that are still successfully airing today. Then running her own company, she has consulted for major players like ABC Studios, Fox, Canal+, and RTL, as well as independent producers. With Read Me Dem, she oversaw the MIP Formats programme, now #1 event in unscripted formats. In this highly disruptive industry, she's been spotting new trends and ideas on both TV and digital, and she has spoken at MIP TV and ATF for several years on the best ideas when TV formats meet digital. Nathalie's also judged on prestigious competitions like the Emmy Awards and the Rose d'Or. And joining Nathalie is Jesse Whittock, insight editor at Broadcast Magazine. Jesse oversees all long-form reporting, editing and writing across the Broadcast Magazine and Broadcast Now website. He's been writing about television for more than 10 years. So, welcome to the show, Nathalie and Jesse.
Thanks, Justin. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Justin. Really nice being here.
Great. Nathalie, coming to you first. Now, you're a familiar face in Cannes, and I bump into you at many industry events like Content London and lots of events all around the world. You've moved to LA now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the idea was that I wanted to strengthen the bridge between Europe and the US. I thought it made sense. Obviously, I'm an expert in entertainment format, so the idea was really to focus on this genre. I just decided to move to be closer to the American players. And I'm not able to talk about my clients. I mean, I usually, like to focus more on, what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is basically scouting. I try to spot the right formats for them to buy. I help them actually, generally speaking, develop their international activity. So it means sometimes, work on co-development deals, first look deals, etc. I'm also, helping them develop formats. So either starting with their development slates and making them fit the needs of the international market. And yes, and sometimes just create from scratch. If I had to summarize in a sentence, it would be just to help them build up their own catalog for the international market. Beside, of course, all the everything that they are doing locally.
Okay. And you say scouting formats. How does that work? Is that scouting domestically or internationally? And what does that look like? Are you looking at all the different new formats that are launching all over the world and seeing what might work for your clients?
I love to try and spot the trends ahead. Maybe it comes from my first job as a journalist. I always try to get the information first. So, and I'm really passionate also about, formats in general. So I really try to understand the trends. Then, of course, I adapt it to my clients' needs. If it's a channel, obviously it's a little bit different from a producer. Although, basically everyone is looking for original ideas that can stand out. So obviously, I always try to look for those original ideas. I think that's the positioning of my clients and their DNA is also very, very important. So sometimes, I can just, start with, something that could fit their DNA, even if it's not really super timely. It has to be timely, but, what I mean is that sometimes the original ideas are in the back catalogs, old ideas that you just have to modernize.
repurposed for the modern day. Yeah. Unscripted formats seem to be coming out of the pandemic really, really quickly all around the world, back into production with all these different shows that have been real staples in the schedule and really, really important, particularly for commercial broadcasters. Are we seeing a new boom in entertainment and unscripted formats?
Yeah, and actually it started 2 or 3 years ago. And it's just because people just love content. I mean, of course, there's been a huge boom of scripted content, but they also love entertainment and unscripted. This boom came just before the pandemic. Maybe the pandemic just strengthened actually this boom, just because unscripted is usually cheaper, more flexible. And obviously you can also find maybe easier solutions when it comes to production. When I'm talking about flexibility, it can also be like the number of episodes. You can definitely, do shorter seasons, see how it works, and it definitely helps this boom. There are definitely fresh ideas, really new and interesting ideas. I hadn't seen that happen for a while. So, in the long run, it definitely helped. And the last thing I wanted to add on the subject is that the two things that people are asking more and more are more interactivity and maybe gamification elements in the content. And that's definitely what entertainment formats are about, more interactivity and just gamified elements. So I think it's just the beginning.
We spoke to Jan Salling on a really early TellyCast a few months ago, and he was talking about formats. There's been many MIPComs and MIP-TVs recently. He's been looking for the next big global mega hit that's about to sweep everything before it, and it hasn't happened really. And I suppose in the last year or two, with the exception of The Masked Singer, maybe, it's certainly time that the unscripted formats industry had another real boost, and there's some new fresh formats, and maybe this pandemic has created the ground to stimulate the sort of creativity that's needed.
We are all looking for the next big thing, that's for sure. I think we shouldn't really focus on that, actually. It'll come when it'll come. And in the meantime, we should focus on smaller ideas. The streamers made the viewers like spoiled kids, I would say. What they want is fresh content. What they want to talk about is, what's next, what's new. They love to be, the one telling their friends and family, about, the fresh new program they saw on one of those platforms. And so we should definitely focus on good ideas. Even if they're small, it's not a problem. Even if they just last 1, 2, 3 seasons, it's not a problem. There are so many new platforms around the world with new needs. I think we should only focus on good content, good idea, and then small ideas can become the next big thing. You never know. Yeah, there are so many stories of strong format that started everyone thought they were really too small and they became hits. So that's something really I'm convinced about. We should not forget about the next big thing, but just focus on original things and just good content in general.
Doesn't need to be a huge idea. It's just the kernel of a really good idea.
If you see what the streamers like, for instance, Netflix, the latest brands we all talk about are, Marie Kondo or, Nailed It, or obviously bigger formats, but those brands are definitely famous, although they are not, the next big thing. They are based on actually a genre that's actually quite old. And it's still, people love to watch it, and they're famous and they're strong. And it's just a definition also of what we consider the next big thing. Obviously, everyone wants a strong brand that lasts for many, many seasons. But that's what professionals want. What viewers want is just fresh content, original content. And if it lasts several seasons because it's strong enough, that's fine. Otherwise, that's fine as well for them, as long as they enjoy it. We shouldn't forget about that. We should definitely jump on all opportunities, even if they seem a little bit small. It's not a problem.
One thing I often struggle with is what makes a format, as opposed to just an unscripted entertainment show, for example. You know, when I've heard shows being pitched and it's like, oh, well, it could be a format. Or from your perspective, what's the definition of a TV format?
To keep it really simple, for me, it's a content that's launched in a territory and then adapted in several territories thanks to a production Bible with a few format key elements.
MIPCOM is obviously coming up in 6 weeks' time. If it doesn't happen in physical form, I mean, we all hope that it will, but if it doesn't, how would you expect this to affect the formats business?
I don't think it's going to affect it that much because we're all actually preparing the event already on Zoom calls. We're all exchanging information, etc. It's just going to be super frustrating because we won't be able to meet physically. I think we all need that. I mean, it's also what this industry is made of, you know. But we all know that, you know, it's just temporary, so we'll deal with it.
We just carry on regardless. Okay. Jesse,
hello.
Great to have you on TellyCast finally. Welcome to the show.
It's been a long time coming, Justin.
But worth the wait. We had broadcasts editor Chris Curtis on the very first show back in April. We were talking about the challenges for a print title as well as an online one, of which broadcast is. Can you tell us a bit about how broadcast has adapted to the pandemic?
When you spoke to Chris on episode 1 of TellyCast, we were just coming to terms with the impact of what the coronavirus would mean for things like print publishing and the news cycle and what sort of content we should be covering. And we were forced to pull our publication of our weekly print magazine. The logistics around pulling together a weekly magazine were not possible. But what has happened subsequently is we really doubled down on our online offering. So we're a subscription publication. The sort of UK TV production and broadcasting business are kind of our core subscribers. And so we really knuckled down on delivering them really top-class news. We tried to give the freelancers as much information as we possibly could. In fact, we made our freelance section of our website free. And we then went back into talking about what we could do in terms of print. A while back, it was related internally, and it's now been related externally, that we're returning to print in September. What is different is we are moving to a monthly format, which is, I think, is pretty cool. My background is in sort of monthly magazines. I'm very excited by the opportunity. We're currently sort of getting into that stress filled period where we're about 3 weeks away from our first deadline. The magazine will be publishing late September on the 24th. That'll be going out to our subscribers, hopefully to home addresses and to offices that have returned back. It's, we're overhauling everything. We've got a new look masthead. We're supersizing the content. Needless to say, we have top quality interviews lined up. We're going to be focusing on things like diversity within British commissioning. We are looking at how indies responded to the COVID crisis. So across scripted and unscripted, what the British production community did in terms of keeping their businesses going, in terms of winning new business, in terms of doubling down on development. We've got some really good talent interviews lined up. We're overhauling our rating section to focus more on sort of consolidated TV ratings, which we think the readers have wanted for some times. And we've been working really hard to make sure that all works. So, it's really exciting, but a lot of work. As you say, you had Chris on in April. He's been working his socks off to redesign the magazine. And I've been working with him on the various regular formats and various other pieces that you'll see in that issue. So, touch wood, we've got a really good product that the subscribers are going to really like, and that, internationally people will see at markets as and when they come back. Your talk about MIPCOM earlier on was making me feel slightly sentimental for those fun days and even more fun evenings in Cannes. So that's kind of where we are, Justin. It's been a sort of hectic, weird, unusual, strange, exciting few months, I guess.
Well, it's a fundamental change to your business model, isn't it? I mean, you're always pushing me for exclusives, Jesse. Can you give us any exclusives on that content? You said talent interviews, because that's something different, isn't it? That broadcast is not really known for.
We have been running more talent interviews online over the summer. We got an exclusive with Michaela Cole. We spoke to Nish Kumar. I interviewed Ramesh Ranganathan a couple of months ago. That was a fun, interesting piece to write. So what I can tell you is we have a really sort of top British talent being interviewed, a very famous, almost like national treasure-like figure who is going to feature in that issue. So that should be worth looking out for.
And can you give us an idea about page count and, what's going to be on the front? Is it always going to be talent-led on the front? Because obviously we're used to Broadcast Magazine having the very latest news that's broken 1 or 2 days before print deadlines would allow. With a monthly magazine, it's presumably going to feel a bit more lifestyle-ish.
Well, I suppose the best way to think of how broadcast is evolving is the place you'll go for your news is online. We'll be breaking stories throughout the day, every day. We'll be delivering newsletters twice daily as we currently do. And the idea being that will be the place you go for your absolutely up-to-date latest news stories breaking on international TV and British TV around the world. And the monthly magazine will be, to an extent, more lifestyle driven in that we've got some sort of interesting sort of fast moving pages in there. There's more profile pieces, but that is much more a kind of thematic and long read style proposition. So, but the idea being that will land on an indie's desk on the towards the end of the month, and they will be able to read that throughout the month, and there's going to be packed full of content, so that they will be able to dip in and out. They'll be able to refer back to things we've written. We can follow up online on things that pop. So the two propositions will be quite different, but I think they work quite harmoniously together.
Some of the other publishing activity that broadcast is well known for are ones to watch, distributor surveys, indie surveys, and obviously your international issues around MIPCOM and MIPTV. Will these all still exist in a different format?
They're absolutely planned in. Unfortunately, I can't get anything like that off of my workload. So you'll be seeing ones to watch, certainly the best places to work. The indie survey, which is probably our biggest and most important single piece of work we do every year, that's going to be there, absolutely. The distributor survey would normally launch in September, but for reasons that I won't go into, they are bitty and industry-specific things. We've decided to push that to December. There'll be a full report in December. And so no changes there. Absolutely not. There's, if anything, the way to look at this is we're sort of supersizing and supercharging what we're doing. There's sort of no reduction on anything.
So it's time for us to look at your stories of the week. Nathalie, yours was a Netflix story around Edinburgh that broke last week. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I read a few articles on, what the directors of unscripted originals and acquisition at Netflix said about their strategy on unscripted formats. And obviously, that's super interesting. And, the Chinese platforms have been developing a lot of unscripted formats in the past few years, were immediately positioned in the format ecosystem. Netflix and Amazon, they've started also to develop many brands. The most famous had been Love is Blind, Floor is Lava, Too Hot to Handle, etc. Beside the content, what I thought was interesting is that they definitely are in the format ecosystem right now. They are definitely testing ideas in different territories. They testing. The two things that interested me are first, that they are really looking for, a new big game show and also a new talent singing show. But beside that, it's the fact that they always want something, bigger and better than their competitor. That's they put a lot of money on the table to do that. They also say, very often say that because they don't have a limited shelf space, They usually play with different release patterns, whether batches or, all at once. They can basically do whatever they want. They said that they were not against bringing a strong format and letting this strong format, this strong brand stay for many, many years. But there would have to be a lot of changes season after season to keep it fresh, because fresh is definitely their really big worry, how to make people really happy with fresh new content. So when you talk about, doing fresh content season after season, in terms of formats, it raises a few questions, because usually when you talk about format, you talk about format key elements. You can slightly change season after season. Usually it's still a format, so you have to keep, those key elements. So how do you make it fresh season after season? Does it mean that it can really drastically evolve? Would they be open to that? And then it would raise definitely a question for format owners. I thought it was super interesting, because it brings a lot of energy again, because they are out loud, what they're looking for. But at the same time, maybe, it would be great to clarify what they think about when they are talking about making content fresh season after season.
Well, to hear Netflix talking about not only formats and game show formats and singing formats, but talking about having them on the service for 20 or 25 years is extraordinary. Do we expect to see a global talent singing show that's going to take on the likes of X Factor or Got Talent, that's going to play out right around the world on Netflix? Is that what we're expecting?
It's definitely what they are planning to do. It won't be extraordinary to see that, because, lately they've been exploiting a lot of, traditional genres. They usually bring something new, and whether on the content side or just because, of the exploitations, they also intend to do a lot of spin-offs, and so to definitely exploit the brand further. They can do whatever they want, and they don't have the constraints that the traditional players have. So for producers, it's definitely super interesting. We can expect them to test a lot of ideas and to try every time to make it bigger or different. Then in terms of interactivity, they cannot exploit the same opportunities as, Facebook, or doesn't mean that they want to try and find a way.
It's interesting in its own right, isn't it? When we were talking about formats and what a format is, and it's something that gets remade in addressing key format points, but being made for different broadcasters in different cultures. And obviously there's always a little bit of give and take, isn't there? There needs to be a bit of an adaptation if you're making a show for India, as you are if you're making it for the UK or you're making it for France, for example. This is a global talent singing show idea. How do you possibly create a global show that's going to work in the majority of Netflix's territories, that's going to work culturally for everybody?
I guess they'll just, be very strategic and maybe launch a few territories first and see what happens. The way they are developing their content is definitely according to their audience. So they know their audience very well, and so they can either just launch a specific format for specific territories if they think it might be tricky, or they can definitely also adapt. And they all know that local content is super successful, so they all know the power of adapting content, even if they have the power to launch it globally. Sometimes it's better also to launch a local adaptation. So they'll be pragmatic as always.
Jesse, what's your story of the week?
My story of the week is around the BBC and the incoming Director General, Tim Davie, who has taken over from Tony Hall in the top job in UK broadcasting. He started this week, so in fact he started today as we record, and I think by the time people listen to this, he will have given his first sort of internal team address to the entire BBC. He started in Glasgow today. He was up there meeting staff, apparently. And he's joined in a really tricky period for the BBC. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if there is ever a period that isn't particularly tricky for the BBC. But it really does feel like he sort of walked into the eye of a storm here. Effectively, the BBC are being hit by several different things that are happening at once. One of his key issues that he has to address immediately is sort of this issue of bias, which is plaguing the BBC at the moment. So commentators on the left and commentators on the right feel that the BBC is catering for the other side too much. And I mean, you might argue that that's the BBC doing its job.
That's healthy, surely, isn't it? You know, if everyone's happy, then
you would think so. But apparently, Davie has talked about the need to what he's described as serve all audiences, and he's been very clear about this. So I think he must feel that there is somewhere down the line there is something that's not quite right. The language he's using is quite similar to the language that Oliver Dowden, the culture secretary, has used in the past, which has got some people on one side of the debate a little bit concerned that the BBC will start to become more compliant with government and sort of become, sort of less confrontational and experiment less and investigate less. I'm not sure that's necessarily going to happen, but I can understand why people are concerned by it. He's doing things like reviewing Twitter use. We've got a really interesting piece on our website, which one of my colleagues wrote today, sort of just outlining all of these various things that Tim Davie will be addressing early on. So there's lots of questions around the impartiality of the journalists, and that's on both sides. There is a lot of questions around the way that presenters sort of conduct themselves in terms of other companies they work for. So he's got all of that to deal with. And then he's also got to look at the content. And one of the stories that's going to come out over the weekend, it was published in the Daily Telegraph, which for listeners outside of the UK, to give it some context, that's a sort of a newspaper from the broadly and staunchly from the right wing. They put out a story saying that Davie was planning to specifically overhaul the comedy output, which for years and years has been considered to be sort of politically to the left. So through shows like the MASH Report, through Nish Kumar is a comedian and a presenter who sort of always gets thrown into the center of these debates. The insiders that we have heard from are very clear that isn't the case, that he's not going to be overhauling comedy. The fact that that story's even out there suggests there is something going on, and that's a concern. I don't know, from a personal point of view, I think, right-wing comedy is really hard to do, right? But that's why there aren't very many right-wing comedians out there. And I saw a tweet today which someone's saying that the reason why there's more left-wing comedy than right-wing comedy on TV is the market forces have just find left-wing comedy funnier, right? And the market dictates what goes on TV ultimately. So even for a public service broadcaster with a license fee like the BBC, they have to follow the market. So I mean, that's my take on it, right? That doesn't necessarily impact on how anyone thinks. Broadly, I could probably say this to you anytime I was to come on here. Tim Davie faces some really serious challenges to ensure the BBC is sort of ship-shape for the future. You guys have obviously just been talking about Netflix and its push into unscripted. The BBC is really desperately trying to go after those sort of same audiences, those sort of 16 to 34 audiences that those shows, those big formats and entertainment shows attract. It needs to do that because it's got a license fee which is being debated all the time. And really the only way that you can justify that is by serving all audiences all the time. And we have done numerous stories at Broadcast which show the BBC is shedding 16 to 34s at a rate that at the moment it doesn't seem like it can stop. There's been various answers to that question bandied around. Last week at the Edinburgh TV Festival digital event, Fiona Campbell, who's the BBC Three controller, was quizzed on a story that broke a few months back about BBC Three, which was turned online in 2015, potentially turning back into a linear channel, and was sort of quizzed quite thoroughly on the rationale behind that. So why are you putting a linear channel for 16 to 34s out there when clearly most 16 to 34s are watching Netflix and on demand? I don't know. I think you probably have to watch that session to get the kind of nuanced answer that Fiona Campbell gave. It's a murky one, and it's a difficult thing for the BBC. There's a lot there. There's a lot for Tim Davie to get his teeth into.
I mean, surely the biggest one is the license fee, isn't it? And, making people pay for iPlayer, because it seems to be a crazy anachronism right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the BBC is wrestling with all these different ways of potentially, funding itself in the future. There was a story being bandied around that Tony Hall, Tim Davie's predecessor, was looking at a sort of Swedish style system, which is very different to the UK funding system. Look, iPlayer at the moment is free, right? That content is on the iPlayer after shows go on the BBC's linear channels, and there's also acquisitions and stuff that they commission directly for the iPlayer. And the paid for stuff at the moment is on BritBox, right, which is a service that the BBC runs with ITV. Should be said, ITV is like by far and away the majority owner of that, and seems to be, from what we understand, the kind of real driving force behind it. Making people pay for something that they've already paid for is a really hard sell, isn't it? So, yeah.
Well, it is. Yeah, it is. But I mean, I guess if you're British, and I guess everybody's had that same frustration when you go away on holiday, or you go away for business, and you're a license fee payer, and you want to watch iPlayer, you want to catch up on those amazing dramas or whatever content from BBC, and you're in the States and you can't access it. That has to be solved. That sort of thing's got to be fairly at the top of a very long list.
Yeah, I mean, the BBC has tried numerous times over the years to export its content in various different ways. It did run a global iPlayer for a few years, cancelled that and stopped funding that a few years back. BBC Studios is probably the biggest distributor in the world outside of the US studios. So you get BBC content delivered that way. There's this very strange story going around at the moment about BBC Four, which is a kind of older skewed arts channel primarily, turned into some sort of streaming service internationally. It looks like there'll be movement on this front, but like as of right now, we're sort of, it's just one of many things on Tim Davie's to-do list to work out what the right way to go is.
Coming on the back of an amazing job that they did as a public service broadcaster to help educate the public and our kids as well over the last few months as well, which has been extraordinary use of resources that only a public service broadcaster could do. So that, I think they really showed the value to certainly a UK audience.
If there was ever a debate as to why the BBC exists and to what the BBC can do, lockdown has really proved like how extraordinarily good the BBC is at responding to challenges and, like you say, providing information, entertainment, all of that stuff when it's most needed. And, there is no one who could objectively look at what the BBC did in lockdown and say that they weren't worth the license fee during that period, even if you don't agree with the license fee sort of, philosophically. There's 100% the BBC were excellent during lockdown.
It's that time in the show where every week our guests get to nominate their hero of the week and who or what they want to get in the bin. Jesse, who's your hero of the week?
Well, I'm going to go for David Olusoga, who delivered the McTaggart lecture at the Edinburgh TV Festival last week. It's an obvious choice, but you know what? Sometimes the obvious choice is the right choice. So David, who is a historian and a presenter, who doesn't come from a sort of traditional white middle class TV background, as it were, gave an extraordinary, amazing speech about the ways that the British TV industry has sort of failed in its quest to become more diverse, and talked through some of the ways that it could improve in the future. I just thought that it was a really brave thing to do, to stand up and basically say, the people who are my paymasters aren't doing a good enough job. I mean, he even acknowledged it up at the top of his speech. He said, if I get any work at the end of this, then I've done well. I would say almost across the board, there was unanimous praise for David's speech. I think I thought he was really fantastic. Posed the questions that needed to be posed. I'm skeptical about the things that have been lip service has been paid to in the past and is potentially being paid to now. And it just felt like it hit the right balance. It was. And it feels like one of those moments that will be remembered in the same way that Michaela Coles and McTaggart from 2018 still resonates in the industry. I think this will be one that people go back to, year after year as sort of, where were you when David said that? I mean, the answer to that for 99% of the people watching it was sat in front of a computer. It was a really, really brilliant speech.
That certainly had that cut through, I think, that he must have been looking for, and roundly praised by the industry as a whole. So, so David's your hero of the week. Nathalie, who's your hero of the week?
So before I give you a name, I just wanted to say that it's not only playing with words, but we should definitely be our own heroes because we have to, in these troubled times, we have to reinvent ourselves. And I'm not only talking about COVID. I'm talking about the digital wave, and everyone has definitely to try and reinvent themselves. And I'm sure that the international market and is definitely a solution, and not only for big players but also for an independent producer. That's the way to be bold nowadays. And so my hero, maybe not of the week, but of the last few months, would be Stéphane Courby. Not only because he's French, yeah. But it definitely. What he did was really bold. His story actually is really, really extraordinary. He started as an intern in an independent production company in France, and when you look at everything he achieved, and now he's running a very strong group, even if it means that in the next few months they'll have to solve really big problems also. Usual problems for mergers for such big groups, but definitely it opens for him really big opportunities. So it's for me, it's definitely the hero of the week.
All right. Jesse, who or what are you telling to get in the bin?
I was sort of racking my brain, and the thing that has been annoying me the most, and it's probably been annoying me for about 2 years.
Okay. Oh, this is going to be a good one. This is you've been waiting to scratch this itch.
I have actually, and there were a few stories that came out this week which sort of annoyed me and potentially calmed me slightly. But what it is, it's The Walking Dead, right? Which is a show that I absolutely love. I've followed it since the first series. I'm one of those folk who didn't give up when around season 7, when the sort of crazy ratings that it used to get went down to sort of normal, regular TV sphere ratings. But basically, without spoiling the entire series, the main character, played by Andrew Lincoln, Rick Grimes, left the show in series 9, but wasn't killed off. That's not a spoiler to say, and was announced very quickly afterwards as that Andrew Lincoln would star in 3 Walking Dead movies, sort of telling his story post the TV series, which I thought was a really good idea. Quite a nice way to potentially to wrap up the entire thing. That was announced ages ago. And whilst I'm not saying it's simple to write a film script, there's basically been absolutely no proper information since. You get the odd piece in the US trades around where an exec producer will say something like, "Oh, I've seen a script and it looks good." But effectively, nothing's happened, right? And the show has been losing steam for quite a long time. There are various spin-off shows which are successful to different degrees. And they're about to launch a sort of youth, like a young adult Walking Dead, which I cannot quite work out how that's going to work. It's just the two sort of concepts of like, zombie horror and young folk. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Maybe it'll be good. Basically, everyone wants to know what's going on with the Rick Grimes character, and no one is saying anything, and I'm getting really bored of it. And I just think they need to hurry up and either cancel it or do it. There you go. That's my gripe.
It's extraordinary, really, if you think about they have a globally renowned franchise, which has taken years to build up, and you would think few movies to add to that sort of cinematic universe, if you like, would be a sort of slam dunk. So if anybody's listening and knows any information whatsoever about these Rick Grimes movies, let us know.
You know what it's like, Justin? It's like, I don't read the Game of Thrones novels, right? But I know that the most, that there's one that George Martin has been writing for about 25 years and never gets around to doing. And, the series like superseded the book, even though they thought that would never happen. It feels like we might be here in 25 years and I'll still be saying, where's the Rick Grimes movie?
Right. Well, if we are still here in 25 years, you can be sure there'll be an invitation to come back on and we'll talk about it again.
All right, I'll hold you to it.
As old men, and expressing our displeasure when the new format, whatever format that we're watching our movies on, or holographic formats. Let's see if there's anything in 25 years. Nathalie, who or what are you chucking in the bin?
I would choose fear, and for myself also. Fear is definitely something I try to fight, not every day, but really very often. And I think that's also what makes us all make mistakes, whether big players or again really independent producers. Everyone is trying because of fear to play with the same recipes, like do reboots or spin-offs or rip-offs, etc. Ultimately, I think our clients are the viewers. They are always grateful to the players who really try to please them with new ideas. Even if they don't watch it, or even if it's not a big success, they'll be grateful to the platform or to the channel who's trying and trying. So that's definitely what's happening with the streamers. But I remember also NBC a few years ago tried a game show. I don't remember the title, but it was the Stephen Lambert game show, and it didn't do really well. But I remembered articles about NBC trying, and that we should support the channel because of that. I think that's definitely fear. Again, is something we should put in the bin every single day.
Quite right, and bravery and creativity is something that really keeps the TV industry going.
Yeah, and that's what makes us passionate about our job. We should never forget why we chose to work in this industry, and it was passion. For a lot of people, it's passion, and we should, always keep that in mind. Just, stick to the content, be passionate about the content. And usually if you are passionate about the content, there's something behind, and we should fight for our convictions. Absolutely.
Well, that's a brilliant note to end on. Nathalie, thank you so much for joining us from LA. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Jesse, from slightly closer to home in London. Great to hear about developments in broadcast. Really look forward to seeing the new magazine when it drops later on in September. And thank you both for coming on TellyCast.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers, Justin. Anytime.
So it's that time of the show where we get to go over to Hollywood and speak to Deadline Hollywood's Peter White. Peter, how are you?
I'm good, Justin. How are you doing?
Very good. Yeah. We're in September now. This is extraordinary. Back to work for everybody. So it's interesting time of the year after all of this pandemic.
I can't believe I've been here for 6 months. It feels like I just stepped off the plane.
Yeah, your experience there has sort of mirrored this whole lockdown scenario. So it's kind of living history of coronavirus from TV land itself.
Certainly one way to make an entrance.
What news stories have you got for us this week?
It's been a bit of a strange week. August usually is a bit quiet in TV terms, but that hasn't really been the case. Certainly for us over here, colleagues of mine breaking TV stories with, the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Nick Cage doing their first TV series. But I figured the biggest story, or certainly the biggest project of the week, has come from the Game of Thrones creators, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. They did that, if you remember, a big Netflix overall deal last year. It was about last August that they actually finally signed it. They were being courted for quite some time. And they've got their sort of big first world-building show to come out of that. They're adapting a sci-fi book trilogy called The Three-Body Problem. A Chinese sci-fi drama tells of humanity's first contact with aliens. You'd think having their names attached would be enough, but listen to this as a list of executive producer credits. You've got Alexander Wu, who was the co-creator of AMC's The Terror, Infamy. He's going to help write and exec produce it. You've got Rian Johnson, the director of Star Wars, The Last Jedi and Knives Out. You have Rosamund Pike involved. You've got Plan B, which is Brad Pitt's production company. This is their big swing. I guess you can sort of see why Netflix paid them hundreds of millions of dollars.
Absolutely, and there's some big names there. I mean, obviously some of them are involved on a talent basis, but perhaps others are just involved on an investment basis, do we think?
You know what, they haven't really split it out, and we've asked the question. They're not actually talent either. It feels like they've got a lot of exec producer credits, and I wonder whether that's to do with, who's involved sort of rights-wise. I genuinely don't know, but I think Hollywood's certainly going this way. I wrote a story about a dance format that had LL Cool J and Chris O'Donnell attached this morning, and there was no particular reason. I think that's, the thing that talent can help sell projects. So I wonder, not that these guys needed any help selling it, but it's nice to be involved, I guess. You often see some sort of odd exec producer credits on big dramas. So, we'll see. It's, I guess for them, it's a case of let's see what they come up with. It's a big world. It's a similarly big world to Game of Thrones, and I think there'll be a lot of pressure, but that's sort of why Netflix done it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, going for a Chinese literary universe, if you like, that they're bringing into this as a project. I guess it must be an incredibly rich book and a rich storytelling. Can you tell us any more about it?
Yeah, the cynic in me sort of suggests that this is one way to finally get Netflix into China. But having done a little bit of research, I haven't actually read the books, but they have been incredibly popular here in the States, and President Obama was a big fan. So I think it's not quite as cynical as perhaps I thought. But yes, big world. How does, there's certain people, the sort of synopsis, certainly from the first book, is some people want the aliens to come here and help take over, and others don't. I think you'll see it similarly to Game of Thrones. There's going to be lots of different worlds within this world. So they're going to spend a lot of money on it. And
any idea when they're going to go into production? I mean, it's $1 million question, or the probably much more than $1 million question. But any idea when they might go into production on this?
No, absolutely not. I have a feeling this is one of those things that might take many years. But regardless of the production shutdown, I don't think this was planning to shoot anytime soon.
Yeah. And what else have you got for us?
The craziest story I've written or read in a while is about this actress called Marisol Nichols. She's a relatively sort of B-C list actress. She's in the CW's Riverdale. She's got a spot in the new Saw reboot. But over the last 6 years, she's been an undercover sex trafficking agent. So she's been working with the FBI and a non-profit group called Operation Underground Railroad to serve as bait for sting operations. And she's done this in a couple of ways. She's either sort of played the part of a parent pimping out a child, or depending on the sort of situation, using her acting skills to pretend to be a child being pimped out. And it's a fascinating story. It was actually, she did a big piece or big interview with Marie Claire back earlier this year. And the sort of hook for us is that she's turning this into a TV series. Sony Pictures Television has just optioned the rights to this story. But it's absolutely sort of gone wild on our site. People sort of can't believe that someone who's sort of been working in network television and feature films had the sort of time or inclination to do this. I certainly can't think of another actor who's had such an odd side hustle.
If you're talking about art imitating life by somebody who's an actress as well, it's quite an extraordinary story. This is a Sony show that's going to come together.
Yeah, they're just in the early stages of development. She's going to exec produce it, and she might star in it, depending. Given how much sort of ink or links, as you like, it's got this week, I can imagine it's sort of being picked up somewhere. Whether that's a streamer or broadcast network, I don't know, but you could see it either way. Fascinating story. I would say to people, go read the Mary Claire piece, because you can't do justice for this without sort of it's a long form read. But it's just those sort of fascinating stories, the sort of oddness of television. And my colleague Jake Cantor had a similar piece a couple of weeks ago about a TV producer who'd gone missing, and I just sort of wonder is there more of this? Is there sort of these stories beneath the stories that we and others can sort of dig out? Because truth is often stranger than fiction, and we're certainly seeing that with this.
Well, absolutely, and I have to say, Peter, some of the stories that we've been discussing over the last few weeks, which is we maybe need a sort of a bit of a klaxon, which is an only in Hollywood type story, right? Because this is couldn't happen nowhere else.
I mean, look, Tinseltown's a crazy town, and there's some strange shit going on here. Let's just see what's next, Justin.
Well, we'll be relying on you to dig those stories out for us for next week's show. Peter, thank you again. I'll post all those links up on the episode description so everybody can go and have a look at this incredible story. So make of it what you will. All the best.
Lovely. Thanks, Justin.
So once again, it's that time in the show where we get to go over to Riga and speak to Girts Licis from K7 Media. Girts, how are you?
Hi, Justin. I'm very well, thank you. How about you? Did you miss me?
Of course, we all missed you. Absolutely. It's great to have you back. It's September.
Exactly.
It's back to business. It's all about back to work. Business is going to come flowing back.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just like it was a year ago.
It almost looks like that. We see the cases of virus rising again, even in the countries which seemed like safe havens back in July, including some Central European markets, which were, preparing to reopen for international productions even, and as well as countries as distant as Australia and New Zealand. However, on the upside, I think you're right. We are seeing a fantastic resilience and creativity. And I mean, not just creative creativity, but producing creativity, being business smart, with various success, obviously, but seems like most countries are adapting to the current situation. At K7, we are producing a regular, what we are calling a quarantine TV report for our clients. And last week, when I was asking our colleagues in Poland, for instance, about what the TV schedules were looking like in their country and how much different they are from a normal fall, which, as we all know, is the peak season in most markets, I got an assuring answer that the production had resumed with precaution measures introduced everywhere, of course. The main channels were set for a regular autumn. And indeed, in Poland, we see big shows like Love Island, Ninja Warrior, and The Voice, to name just a few, either in production or already launching. And since I've started now talking about Central Eastern European situation, then it's pretty much the same in other countries of that region as well. Big shows like Your Face Sounds Familiar, MasterChef, Dancing with the Stars, at least 3 more countries premiering The Masked Singer as well. Of course, I realize that not all markets are so lucky. Australians, for instance, have been forced to stop the production of The Masked Singer just before recording the finale, putting the entire cast and crew of this popular show into isolation after several members reportedly being tested positive. But I think that sometimes the measures taken to guarantee success of the recordings and well-being of participants and crew can be as demanding as doing the show itself, Like, for instance, in UK, as you probably know already, 120 members of Great British Bake Off production lived in a self-contained biosphere for 6 weeks during the shoot to avoid having to socially distanced. And in US, all Big Brother contestants were requested to spend 2 months in isolation, even prior to entering the house. But one thing is for sure, though, even in countries where the epidemiological situation is slightly better, the list of returning seasons of well-known formats is much, much longer than new launches. And we are also increasingly seeing shows which used to bring their participants and crews to exotic destinations, moving production back to their home territory. As you may recall, I already in earlier editions reported about the Finnish version of Love Island, which was set up in Finland's territorial waters this time. And this pattern is now followed by a few other shows, like in UK, production of I'm a Celebrity, moving into a ruined castle in North Wales instead of Australian jungle, while the US version of Love Island has changed its production set from the tropical Fiji villa to Las Vegas. And ITV Studios Sweden is currently producing locally a Corona special of long-running sports reality competition Superstars, which is usually filmed in Cyprus. And a similar approach is taken in Sweden by various other shows normally recorded abroad, including Survivor, Eternal Glory, and Ex on the Beach.
So the question is, with all of these shows swapping out these exotic sun-trapped locations for more local locations every day, could this set a new precedent for reality television?
It's probably too early to come to such conclusions, but if viewership doesn't significantly drop, this might spell a new era of local production. While costs may be similar due to the increased expense of production in the current environment, the benefits of not having to ship endless cast and crew abroad is surely to be a growing factor for production companies and broadcasters alike. And whether the altered atmosphere will still provide that much-needed slice of escapism remains to be seen, but with a number of locally made series on the horizon, we don't have too long a wait to find out, I think. Personally, I think that going forward, it's going to be a healthy mix of both. And certainly, after watching a lot of their Nordic noir-like forests and lakes, the same Swedes will be looking forward to get back to those paradise islands again. But of course, there will be shows that will prove working equally well in different environments. Obviously, what we are seeing, particularly during summer, was that the current travel limitations had surged the audience's thirst for programming involving travel. Such shows also cater for the broader trend of escapism, which doesn't necessarily mean that viewers need to be virtually transported to an inland paradise. Such escapism can range from total immersing into beauty of nature to accepting that reality could be actually worse than where I am in now, sitting and watching this from my couch. And one way to show different bits and pieces of the world, but still avoiding crossing multiple borders, could be, for instance, sending separate teams to explore different countries, or even form new co-production partnerships with local companies. In such way, a show can provide that good old feel that the whole world is still travelable. And we see such examples emerging recently. For instance, Discovery Channel in Poland just launched a show which follows 3 different teams who left their previous lives to travel the world in a recreational vehicle. And the episodes have been filmed in so different places like Spain, Georgia, and Australia as well.
So can you see any other non-scripted trends particularly standing out?
I've probably told it before, but it's maybe the feel-good, good vibe shows in general, entertainment with purpose, assuring shows that are trying to boost some confidence that we are all in this together and things are going to get better again. For instance, there is a variety of shows in different countries where businessmen, entrepreneurs, those who have money are finding ways to help those individuals or communities which haven't been so lucky at these times. Or even, famous long-running business formats are adapting that quite different note in some territories, like The Dragon's Den, for instance. Togetherness as an allegory is also at the heart of The Bridge, originally a Spanish format, El Puente, a reality series currently in production in the UK, in which 12 strangers are brought together on the edge of a lake in the British countryside and given 20 days to build a bridge to the prize spot, which lies at the center of the lake. And if they are successful, the group must vote for who they think is most deserving of the prize. And then the winner must decide whether to keep the money or share it with their team. Similarly, in Australia, the locally very popular home renovation show, The Block, has applied a new twist this season, a new purpose, we can say, with participating couples renovating rundown period homes from the first half of the 20th century and turning them into luxurious living spaces. In Belgium, they just launched a daily quiz show, which is even called The Positives. Each half-hour episode sees 3 celebrity panelists go in search of the best news of the day, setting aside the doom and gloom that so often dominates headlines.
Oh, that's interesting. Belgium again. We touched on some Belgian shows quite a few weeks ago, and we're touching again here on Belgium. I think that we should probably look at do a Belgium special at some point soon, really to understand what's actually going on over there. There's a lot of creativity happening. But you regularly bring to my attention, Girts, some of these formatted ideas which, we wouldn't imagine even existed. Anything to share? You've given me the starter, the main course. What about dessert?
Well, I think this time it's probably got to be a production from Czech Republic, and it's a reality show that sees 16 entrepreneurs participating in various competitions. Just guess. In the field of marijuana growing. The winner is going to receive $1 million cash prize and a chance to cooperate with a man called Michael Straumietis, the show's trailblazer and a world's tycoon of the hemp fertilizer industry. The format is called The Next Marijuana Millionaire. And so you don't think it's just some kind of a joke. This show is actually airing on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Pluto TV, and other streaming services.
Wow. Well, it's high time somebody made a show.
It's high time. It's high season. It's high time. It's TV high season.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. Well, you've got to say California. They've got to be that's going to be a prime market for this type of show. Last time I was over in California, I just the smell was everywhere of grass, and it's obviously really key part of society over there now. But interesting. Can we see the next Marijuana Millionaire being the big new international format, I wonder? Maybe. Let's see. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll speak to you soon.
Speak soon.
Well, we've reached the end of another week's show. Thanks as always for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends and colleagues on social media. If you want to hear about our advertising and sponsorship packages, please email me on justin@boomdialogue.com. That's justin@boomdialogue.com. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers. We'll see you again next week. Till then, stay safe.